So, the European Union is making a huge bet on clean heat. We're going to dive into a really ambitious plan to tackle one of the toughest, but kind of overlooked parts of the climate problem: the incredible heat needed to make pretty much everything, from steel to breakfast cereal. It's a monster of a challenge, and the EU's new strategy here, well, it just might be a game changer. So, here's the roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to unpack the true scale of this industrial heat problem. Then we'll get into the EU's really clever solution, this clean heat auction. We'll look at who can get in on it, how the whole thing actually works from start to finish, and finally, we'll talk about why this new way of funding things is so important. All right, first things first, let's really get a handle on the problem itself. We're talking about industry's massive, and for the most part, invisible heat challenge. Let me ask you something. When you picture industrial pollution, what comes to mind? Probably big smokestacks, right? But what if I told you one of the most stubborn climate problems is something you can't even see? It all comes down to a single word: heat. We're talking about the high-temperature process heat that's essential for manufacturing almost everything in our lives. For decades, it's been the energy backbone of industry. And guess what? It's been powered almost exclusively by burning fossil fuels. And this really gets us to the heart of the conflict. You've got two sides here. On one side, there's the old guard, fossil fuel heat. It's the established, default way of doing things, but it pumps out enormous amounts of emissions. And on the other side, that's the future, clean, electrified heat. The big hurdle, of course, is that switching over takes a ton of new investment and new technology. And check out this number, 70%. This shows you just how deep that fossil fuel dependency runs. Just to even be considered for this program, a project has to be replacing a boiler that runs on at least 70% fossil fuels. That high bar tells you everything you need to know about the scale of the problem they are trying to fix. Okay, so we have this massive problem. How in the world does the EU plan to tackle it? Well, that brings us to their very new, very interesting solution: the clean heat auction. First, a little background. This auction is actually part of a much bigger program called the Innovation Fund. You can think of it as the EU's multi-billion-euro war chest, designed to find the most promising clean technologies and get them out of the laboratory and into the real world fast. And the heat auction is one of the sharpest tools in that chest. See, instead of just handing out grants to whoever asks, the EU is making companies compete against each other. The whole point is to find and fund the projects that can deliver clean heat for the absolute lowest cost to the taxpayer. It's all about efficiency. I love this analogy because it makes the whole concept just click. It's a reverse auction. Think about it. You're not bidding the price up to buy something. You're bidding the price down on the subsidy you need to make your clean heat project work. The winners are simply the ones who can do it the cheapest. So here's how it works in 3 really simple steps. First, you come up with a solid, credible project to generate clean heat. Second, you figure out the absolute rock-bottom subsidy you need to make it happen, and you submit that as your bid. And finally, the EU just ranks all the bids, and the lowest ones that pass all the quality checks get the money. It's that simple. It's competitive, and it's totally focused on value. Okay, so this all sounds pretty interesting, right? But it brings up the big question: are you eligible to bid? Let's get into the who, what, and where. As you'd expect, the rules of the road are pretty specific. First, your project has to be located somewhere in the European Economic Area. It also has to be a certain size. And most importantly, it has to be focused on electrification or renewables. So nuclear projects aren't eligible for this one. But the core mission is simple. Your project has to make industrial heat, and it has to directly slash greenhouse gas emissions. And who can actually apply? Well, there are basically 2 key roles. You have the beneficiary, that's the main applicant. They're the ones signing the grant agreement and are 100% on the hook for the project. This could be a single company or a whole group. Then you have subcontractors. Think of an engineering firm hired for a specific job. They do the work, but they aren't formally tied to the grant itself. Now, this is a really, really important point. This auction is open to everybody. It doesn't matter if your company is one of the big players in the EU's emissions trading system or not. If you run a factory that needs heat, doesn't matter if you're making food, chemicals, paper, you name it, you are eligible to apply. Okay, so you've got a project, you're eligible, now what? What happens next? Let's walk through the whole auction process, from the moment you bid to the day you're up and running. So the EU uses this really clever system they call the evaluation cascade. It's super efficient. First, they just rank every single bid by price, from the cheapest to the most expensive. Then they take only the top bids that fit within their total budget and put those through a detailed quality check. If your bid price was too high to make that initial cut, you're rejected right away, no full review needed. It's all about getting the most bang for their buck. And here's a number that shows they are not messing around. To prove your project is financially ready to go, you have to submit letters of intent that cover at least 60% of the total equity you need. This isn't for pipe dreams. You have to prove you've got serious financial backing just to be considered. And if you win, wow, the pressure is on. The second that agreement is signed, a clock starts ticking. You have just 2 years to get all your funding locked in. That's what they call financial close. From that point, you've got 4 years to get the thing built and running. And only then, over the next 5 years, does the grant money actually get paid out. And only if you can prove you're delivering the clean heat you promised. All right, let's pull back and bring this all home. Why does this auction model matter so much? Because, this is about way more than just handing out a grant. And this is where the real genius of the idea shows up. A traditional grant might just cover, say, a fixed chunk of a project's cost. But a competitive auction like this, it does something way more powerful. It forces the market to reveal the true price of decarbonization. The EU discovers the absolute lowest subsidy that's needed to get these projects built. This isn't about funding one factory. It's about creating a whole new market. So what's the bottom line here? What's the big picture? Well, by forcing competition, this auction drives down costs for taxpayers. Simple as that. It also gives investors the confidence they need to actually back these new clean heat technologies. It's a targeted strike against emissions in the toughest industries, and it creates a powerful new template that could be used to fund all kinds of green tech in the future. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. We've seen how this model works for industrial heat, which is a huge, huge challenge. But the bigger question is, could this competitive, price-finding model be the key to unlocking decarbonization across all of our toughest, most stubborn industries? It's a powerful idea, and definitely one we'll be watching very, very closely.